Meeting to order. Monday, September 13th, Washburn City Council. Roll call, please.
Dave Anderson.
Here.
Carl Broberg.
Here.
Jennifer Mazias. Jennifer Mazias. Mary McGrath.
Here.
Tom Nimes.
Here.
Karen Spears Novacek.
Here.
Laura Tulowitzki.
Here.
And we have one. Excellent. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a reminder, since we are online as well, and many of us wearing masks, to be sure to speak slowly and clearly into your microphone so that everyone can hear. Next item is approval of minutes from the council meeting of August 9th.
Mayor, I move approval of the August 9, 2021 minutes.
Then I'll second it.
Okay. So we have a motion with the details in a second by Karen and Tom. Is there any discussion, questions, edits? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I abstain.
Okay. With one abstention. Noted. Next item, approval of monthly expenditures via roll call vote.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the review of the monthly expenditures as reviewed.
Second.
I heard Dave first, so we'll go with a motion by Karen, second by Dave. Roll call vote.
Laura Tulowitzki.
Yes.
Karen Novacek.
Yes.
Tom Nimes.
Yes.
Mary McGrath.
Yes.
Carl Broberg.
Yes.
Dave Anderson.
Yes.
Motion carried. The next item is public comment. Is there anyone here from the public or online that would like to address the council? I'm not seeing anyone, so perhaps everyone is here for a specific item. So we will move on. The next item, mayoral announcements, proclamations, and appointments. As far as announcements go, there's nothing earth-shattering, but I'll just mention a few things. There is a ribbon cutting on Wednesday for the National Scenic Byway designation that has occurred this year, and we will be receiving a commendation from the governor. It is, a pretty big deal to get a national designation, and that is now our 8th national designation that we have in Bayfield County. So, lots of attention coming to us because of that. So feel free to join us 3 p.m. on Wednesday. It's at Legendary Waters Resort and Casino on the back patio. It was going to be at the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center, but because of COVID protocols, they were not able to supply a backup plan of an indoor meeting if necessary, but it looks like the weather will cooperate at this point, but now we're at Legendary Waters. Also, as noted on the Facebook page, we do have some public input sessions coming up for the DOT road reconstruction. I want to say October 6th and 7th. There's a meeting specifically for businesses on the 6th, I believe, and then for the general public on the 7th. So be sure to check that out if you are interested in seeing the first draft of what is being planned based on meetings that have occurred so far. This is our opportunity to give input on phase one. I would encourage everyone who has an interest in this project to participate. So please do make note of those dates, and hopefully that will work for you to participate. And then the schedule somehow got a bit off track, but we will be wrapping up the community branding process soon. Our extension liaison has gotten back in touch and has some updates for us that we'll be regrouping on and then coming up with the results of that process. If anyone has photos of life in Washburn that you would like to share, please do so. You can send them to washburnmayor@gmail.com. We're looking for just literally photos that capture the essence of life in Washburn as it is. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, just showing people living their lives, hopefully happily, here in Washburn. And that is all I have for announcements. I do have one proclamation, and that is for Domestic Violence Awareness Month for October. And I will go ahead and read that here, although I may be doing another event specifically about this coming up to be determined. And that is, whereas domestic violence is a serious crime that affects people of all races, ages, gender, and income levels, and whereas domestic violence is widespread and affects over 4 million U.S. citizens each year, and whereas 1 in 3 U.S. citizens have witnessed an incident of domestic violence, and whereas children that grow up in violent homes are believed to be abused and neglected at a higher rate than the national average, and whereas domestic violence costs the nation billions of dollars annually in medical expenses, police and court costs, shelters, foster care, sick leave, absenteeism, and non-productivity, and whereas only a coordinated community effort will put a stop to this heinous crime, and whereas Domestic Violence Awareness Month provides an excellent opportunity for citizens to learn more about preventing domestic violence and to show support for the numerous organizations and individuals who provide critical advocacy, services, and assistance to victims. Now, therefore, I, Mary D. Motiff, Mayor of the City of Washburn, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2021 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the City of Washburn, and urge our citizens to work together to eliminate domestic violence from our community. And finally, I have 2 appointment recommendations. And the first is to the Plan Commission, and I would just like to say thank you to John Barigi for his many years of service to the city. John is going to be moving from the area, and so he had to step down from those 2 committees. And in light of that, I did have actually more than 1 application for the Plan Commission, but the other applicant already serves on a commission for us. And since I had a choice, I'm recommending Felix, who is a very qualified person to serve on the Plan Commission. And that way also we're not spreading people across multiple commissions. That has caused an issue sometimes when someone isn't available. It's affecting multiple committees or commissions that are functioning. So I thought it best to spread that out a little bit, as long as we have someone who is very qualified and willing to serve the community by stepping up on the Plan Commission. I recommend Felix Kalinowski for that. And for the Harbor Commission, another very qualified and responsible person, Matt Kroll, I'm recommending to serve on the Harbor Commission. And so with that, I would look for a motion.
So moved for both.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mary McGrath, and I'm going to go a second to Tom this time. We keep getting a tie. To to approve those two appointments, one to the Plan Commission, one to the Harbor Commission. Felix to the Plan Commission, Matt to the Harbor Commission. Any discussion, comments, or questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you to both Felix and Matt. Really look forward to having your participation on those committees. And of course, it happens quickly. Both of those committees are meeting this week, so we will enjoy having them on board. And again, thank you to John Parigi. Okay, our next item is a public hearing, discussion, and action on Resolution 21-007 to vacate South 10th Avenue West from Omaha Street North to the alley. Mark McGinley and Rick Rubley petitioners. I would look for a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make the motion open the public hearing. Second.
Motion by Tom, second by Carl. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our public hearing is open. Is anyone here to address this item at the public hearing? I don't see anyone. So with that, I would look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Dave, second by Carl to close our public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item. Now we take action on tab 2, which is the request to vacate the south half of 10th Avenue West.
So moved.
Motion by Mary, second by Dave. Any comments, questions, discussion? I think we have quite a bit of information here. Not a great map, but nonetheless, it seems to make sense. Any comments from anyone? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Should I clarify if that motion includes access to utilities?
It's in the resolution.
It's in the resolution. Excellent. All right, very good. We're covered. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And we will move on to our next item, which is discussion and action on allowance of additional primary structure on property at 19 West Bayfield Street, Olson Building Materials petitioner. And there was a new sketch that was passed out here to refer to on this, and it is under tab 3. Thank you for bringing this, thank you for bringing this proposal forward, Mr. Olson. Would you like to address the council?
Yes, we're, am I on?
Tap on it.
We're just seeking your approval to build a warehouse building, just dry storage on the east side of our present warehouse that's attached to the office, between the club and us. And you've got drawings there. I did get Northwest Builders to do some preliminary drawing. That's the drawing I submitted. And just going through it with their designer, this building would have to go to state approval because it's a commercial building, even though it's fairly simple, but they have to approve the wiring, the layout, and those things. And you would also have to approve it from city, but they're not going to design it completely until we get permission to go ahead. So it's a 30 by 52 building. It would be accessed from the alley. It would be basically for plywood and sheetrock storage. And it would be 56 feet from the front sidewalk to the front wall. So basically back where our building goes to a two-story, it comes forward about 4 feet from that. And I realize you have to make it, so we would put wood siding on it. He brought up some issues in the design, whether it has to be firewall or not. Our existing building is a wood building with steel sheeting on it. This building would be a wood building. Well, it could have steel sheeting if you would allow it on the wall between our store and the back wall, because you'd never really see that wall. But the wall facing the Civic Center and the front street would be wood. The back wall is basically a big door. And it would slope to the main street with a white roof similar to the roofs we've got. And my guesstimate is it's about a $60,000 improvement. It would not be attached to the other building because we would have to upgrade everything in the existing building, wiring, plumbing, no, not plumbing maybe, but wiring and those elements, door swings and all that. And we're not going to do it. It's not going to have a breezeway. It's just going to be a separate building for basically storage. So we're seeking your permission to go ahead with it. The one thing that this designer said, if he started right now, they might get state approval done in 8 weeks, which means that's getting pushy for court, because this would be a slab with 2x6 studs, not a pole barn. It would be getting pushy whether we get it done this season or don't get to start till next spring. We would like to get it done, at least if we got the slab for it, we could build it this winter. So we need your permission to go ahead.
So, in regards to that, I think there might be a delay in that it would have to go to the plan commission first.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if that still is in the time frame that you're thinking. And is the designer looking at the zoning codes and all that?
No, he's looking at state code at this point. He's not from here.
Okay.
So we would have to inform him of what local codes would have to be met. And I don't think there's any serious one thing. There is one thing, the gas line runs right under it now, and I know that would have to be moved, so that's another issue. I mean, they're going to let us build a building on top of a gas line. It's the gas line that feeds our furnace, or our building, so it could be just rerouted around this thing. So those are all things that make it maybe somewhat impossible to get it done this fall, but we still need the building, whether it's this fall or whether it's
Sure.
in the spring.
And that's what we're looking at today, is just the concept of a second building needs approval of the council. And if the council does approve the concept of a second building, then it would have to go to plan commission to meet all those rules and regulations. And Karen?
Mayor, I would move that we approve the additional primary structure for Olson Building Materials, and that it, obviously the final drawing be reviewed by the plan commission.
A second.
Motion by Karen, second by Carl. Are there any comments, questions, or discussion items? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you for moving forward with it.
Thank you, Ron.
Excellent. Our next item is discussion and action on ordinance 21-004 to regulate the operation of short-term rentals. This is tab 4 of your packet. And since the last revision, I don't believe we've had any comments come in.
Melissa wants to speak.
Melissa, did you have a comment at this time?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay, great. I just wanted to say a thank you on behalf of the chamber and the chamber members to city council and to city administration for listening to us over the last couple months, going back, looking at things, talking with people, and I think this newest draft is something that we all can get behind. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate your feedback and working with us on getting to this point. Karen?
I move approval of ordinance 21-004, providing for licensure and regulation of short-term rentals.
I'll second that.
Okay, we've got a motion by Karen, a second by Tom. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion on this item?
I'm curious if there has been any more input from any constituents about concerns that have come up with any short-term rentals that have been active in the last couple of months. I've seen stuff very active, but I haven't heard from anyone. Just wondering if there have been any new concerns or no one?
No, nothing new has come in here. Has anyone here heard anything?
No.
Nope. I think we're at our final product here. Anyone else? Seeing nothing, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And all abstain.
Motion carries with one abstention. And our next item is presentation, discussion, and referral to Personnel and Finance Committee of the 2022 General Fund Operating, Capital, and Debt Service Budgets, tab 5.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mary.
Second.
Second by Karen. There's a lot to the budget process. And, you know, this is not the time to probably get into a lot of the details, but if anyone has any specific direction that they would like to make on any item, this would be a good time to do that, because as it heads to personnel finance, they would have that knowledge going in, what the wishes of the council are on anything in particular. Scott has a very detailed memo, which is helpful. You know, we only do this once a year, and so it's a lot to take in. Tom?
I have a question on part of this. The Parks Committee wants to put a yurt up. I'm wondering what the amount of revenue that's going to generate, because I do know numbers were ran last Thursday that if we were doing an extension down there on that overflow, with hook up for city water and sewer, at $50 a day, that comes out to $91,000 a season for 10 sites.
You mean instead of putting up a yurt?
For now, yes, because that would generate more income for the city much faster.
Sure.
I'm not against the yurt.
Just out of curiosity, while we're on that topic, has that option of developing the overflow been addressed prior?
I would say that issue was referred to the park committee, well, probably a year or two ago, but it has not been taken up.
That specific issue?
Correct.
Okay. So then the question is, is it the Parks Committee that would be recommending whichever Avenue would proceed with that development, whether it be a yurt or development of the overflow camping, that would come back to council then for the, so are we basically just approving the amount in the budget regardless of which way the development proceeds?
I would say no to that. I mean, understand, the park committee is simply advisory, and it, is intended to provide guidance on policy and design and so forth. So if the council desires something, well, I mean, the council is free to take whatever action that it sees fit. So if the council wants to explore the development of additional campsites, that's fine. If you have a specific area or a couple areas that you want to have explored, that would be helpful. And if you allocate the appropriate dollars, we will then do the appropriate work necessary to do the study on how many sites, how can they be laid out, what are going to be the costs of the necessary utilities, do we have to have an amendment to our camping permit, all the questions that will come up. We just haven't done that because the council has not given us the direction to do that at this point. So.
Karen?
I have not looked at the details, Scott, but what have you allocated in the proposed budget for a yurt construction? Have you done, is it?
That would be $60,000, but that is actually not within this budget. That is it's recommended that that project come out of the park designated.
Oh, that's right, okay, yeah, I did do that.
And so, a different project theoretically would also come out of the park designated fund?
Yes,
Yeah.
if you're looking at a larger scale improvement to the park, it should come out of that fund. That's what that fund is intended for. Would we be able to afford both? I can't necessarily answer that off the top of my head. That's going to be dependent on how far we want to spend that fund down to. So that fund, just so everyone is aware, is replenished by, and I can't remember, I have it in here somewhere, if every $3 or $4 of every daily use site gets put into that fund. So generally it gets replenished on the order of some $30,000 a year.
Do you know what the balance is currently?
The balance currently, I think, off the top of my head, is in the $150,000 range.
Karen?
Well, and there were additional things that were to come out of the park fund also. The tennis court resurfacing was another capital expenditure that was recommended from that park fund. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes.
Tom?
I got a question. Jerry, were you able to come up with those numbers, or?
No, I was playing around with them and trying to get some numbers from some different contractors and materials, but nobody wants to answer the phone or call back.
Because I was just curious on the cost. I don't think it's going to be 50,000.
We've had figures sitting around in some of our reports. We could look at the last park report. There should have been a guesstimate of some work being done by staff when available, time available.
For development?
We did come up with individual, we came up with costs for each campsite and what each campsite would cost. We do have that somewhere. Of course, it would have increased by now.
That's for the overflow, Mary?
That would have been generally for any increase
Just any
of
increase,
sites,
okay.
yeah.
In looking at the budget projection here, it looks like under, hold on, I have to get back to the right page. Under the capital budget expenses, just out of curiosity, total expenses in 2021 budget was $659,000, and 2020 year was 325. 2022 proposed is 335. Was there something big I'm missing that was in the 2021 budgeted expenses being that high?
There was, I had in there $300,000 for the library tuck point project.
Got it. Thank you. I knew there had to be something big that I was missing it. I guess we don't need to make any decisions on this right now, but that's something that you would like to see looked at as an option.
Yeah, I've mentioned that before, brought that up before, along with putting an RV park and still leaving room for rustic camping or primitive camping, however you want to put it, on that book overflow site to generate income for the city of Washington.
So that would be a direction, and I don't know if that's something that the council would vote on as a whole, or is that just a recommendation from one council member going forward, and then to be discussed and hashed out, and it would come back?
Well, it's a matter of how you want to handle that. You can consider that as part of the overall budget with all of the proposed items to come out of capital and or the park designated fund, and consider that as a whole, and wish to reallocate or add additional dollars to do the specific study and engineering work necessary for an additional campground at that time, and perhaps we can get some more detail on that as we go through the process. You can do it later, or if that is something that you want to charge forward with now, you can. I can tell you that I'm not going to necessarily be able to work on that and right at this moment with every other project we have going on right now. But it's something that we would have to get some engineering services on, and we would probably at least start that process.
Oh, you know where some of those figures were, Scott, was from that Madison company. Remember when we were going to remain the same, or we were going to shift the entire park? There were
It's all in that
prices.
park.
It's all in that one, yeah.
Yeah, and that would have to be revised.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dave?
So, I am not a proponent of government getting into the lodging business. And having the yurt, that's our property that we're renting out, basically like a motel room. It's not like a RV slot or a camping site. Many cities do that, and that's, that I think that's fine. I would rather than spend money on a yurt, I would rather spend the money on engineering and design fees to develop a larger RV and camping ground on our property. So that's what I would be in favor of. And if we get a motion to say that, I will.
And I don't know if we need a motion for something that's specific right now, or just maybe, can we do a straw poll? How many people are thinking that they would rather lean towards that kind of a development rather than a yurt?
Me, since the 70s, so I'll say that.
I'm not opposed to it. I don't know if I can comment any more than that without more information in terms of, what might a total package look like once you do engineering and making the site appropriate and another restroom and, all of those things would cost money. And it may be worth probably worth looking at and moving ahead. We've talked about it before. We know that our campground was popular this summer. We had to turn people away. So the use would be, I think it would be used, there's no question about that. I think it behooves us to gather some real good figures to see what we're talking about to make that happen. And the finance committee can certainly, we're having our first meeting tomorrow, so we could certainly look at that as we, I mean, we won't have all that detail yet, but we could certainly look at it and, you know, continue to have that as a focus.
Tom?
When I talked to a former DPW, he had said that we wouldn't have to have a bathroom on the overflow if we had city water and sewer hookups. To do the RV park, we'd have to have a bathroom. Because that would be over, and that would be where that rustic or primitive camping, however you want to put it, would be also. Which would make money. The other one would take longer to make money for the city,
Sure.
unless we could do a public-private partnership there on that bathroom. But that overflow site, I could have swore Bob has said 30,000, maybe 40 at the most, to run those hookups. That's why I was asking Jerry, hopefully he can give me a set price.
Well, yeah, and that's something that finance and personnel will look at. So, you know.
And that was then and now, you know, it may be not a good figure anymore, but, you know, we need the information, I think.
Does anyone else have input on this particular topic? Carl or Laura?
Yeah, I would prefer to see this developed at campground. I think there's no doubt in my mind that it would be used. I think there's a number of options in terms of restroom facilities and showers that could be done, like we did down in the marina. You know, that's a prefab. It comes in complete. So, yeah, I would prefer that we explore that option. Engage an engineering survey to have it come back with a plan.
Okay, Laura? Any thoughts on this?
I couldn't hear what you said, Carl, so if I'm repeating anything. My first thought was that, like Karen said, I need more information, and I feel like this is, if we are talking about this to approve an amount or change something in the budget, this is just for the discussion right now and not to approve it right now, right?
Correct, yep.
Okay, so we're just having a chat about the idea, because I haven't heard anything officially from Parks. But I haven't been going to their meetings or reading their minutes. So is this something that's come up recently and I missed an email?
Mary, did you say something about Parks, just having talked about this before, or?
Yes, yeah. But I'd also say too, this has been, you know, this has been on every administrator's plate, every mayor's plate since I've been around in the late 70s. So part of the setback has always been, part of the setback has always been that when we did the expansion with that company, we put that group together, we walked the entire property, we identified primitive, we identified more trailer spots. I mean, so I think it would behoove us to direct the park committee to move forward and organize this information so you don't have to. It's there, it's at the fingertips. The only thing that's going to change are some of the prices, but those can be easily adjusted by some of the sort of engineering that went through with that. They were more design than engineering, yeah. So instead of you walking away and having to juggle stuff, I think it'd be great if we could direct them, pretty much give them the yurts off the table for most of us here, and we'd like to move forward with expansion. Can they do the research, like the building down there? Because we will need a bathroom, and we, you know, how many sites will make it worth the effort and money that has to go into it? There's more information on a West End expansion than probably anything else we have sitting on the shelves. So,
okay.
So I don't think we should stop there. I think we should look at these Stanley Memorial Park as well. We have that whole block of property connecting to that as well. So that's all. That should be where the rustic chamber goes, in my opinion.
And that could be a phase two in a sense too, Dave, because one of the things we do know that's increased are the motor homes and the trailers. And there's no amount of work at Memorial Park except taking down trees that will accommodate that. So if we really, eyeball it and brain it to the West End Park expansion with some, again, people want to be, there's a lot of primitive campers that have boats. So they want to be at the boat launch campground. I would say phase two of the parks, would be Memorial Park then, and not stop at West End. Because we've got the gems, we really do.
And that could include revamping the access at Memorial again, potentially.
There was all
But
kinds
that's a whole
of,
other story.
Yeah.
there was all kinds of Class A's up on that overflow this summer, all summer long.
Yes, so there's
Yeah, the demand is there.
yes.
So I think there's one thing that we can pass along to finance and personnel to focus on. Anything else that anyone wants to get into as far as direction for the budget? Scott, is there anything you want to add in addition to what you have in your memo?
I don't have anything in addition to beyond what I have said. And continue to wait for additional information and updates, and as that comes in, I will let people know. The discussion on finding additional revenue sources is good. I think that is important and long overdue. We're going to have to come to consensus on the park plan, because the park plan that we have did not put additional camping where we have been discussing it, and that's been one of those hurdles. And so you just have to know going in, you're going to have to revise that, or a plan is a plan, it can be changed. So it's not locked in stone. And that was one of the reasons I believe that plan sat on the shelf. So you have to keep that stuff in mind.
Well, that, and they put a bunch of fluff in it. So they sort of bypassed the expansion of the campground, in a sense, and fluffed out all these other things like horseshoes and volleyballs and boathouses, and we need campsites, and that's where that failed miserably. Yeah.
Karen?
How old is that plan, Mary?
2016.
I was going to say 6 years.
Something like
Yeah.
Not dated, but not really.
And does that plan live
Yeah,
on the
right.
website? I think it does, maybe, or it did at some point.
that. If you think it's that.
The budget is a tremendous challenge, and one of the things, we'll get into this a little bit more later, but one of the things that we're obviously wrestling with is not being able to, we're not growing, and so we are looking for these alternate revenue sources. One of the things that I just have to comment on is the statement that tourism being the major portion of the local economy and the city not having many opportunities to directly benefit from it. I guess I would say instead this is one of the ways that the city directly benefits from that. I think tourism directly benefits the city in a lot of ways, and indirectly more so. We're not getting direct revenue, specifically from, someone renting a yurt necessarily, but we are from the campgrounds. And we are from room tax, and we are from all the businesses that are supported by the tourism economy. So, anyway, that's my little.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly, and I was a little upset to hear or to read that, because I can tell you that we currently in Washburn have amenities in this town that we would not have And that is just a plain and simple fact. Without tourism, the marina would not be here without it. This grocery store across the street would not be here without it. Most towns of 2,000 people have a small hole-in-the-wall little grocery store that's on the verge of collapse. We're lucky to have the grocery store that we have. The pharmacy wouldn't be here. Olson's wouldn't be here. The foundry wouldn't be here, I could argue. I was struggling to find a connection between the foundry and tourism. And most of the people that work at the foundry need a spouse that also works, and most likely that spouse has a job related to tourism. And without that second job, they wouldn't be here. They wouldn't be here if they couldn't buy groceries. Every business on Main Street relies 100% on tourism. And there isn't anyone, if someone wants to argue that with me, I will sit here for 4 days if you want to argue that, because that is the plain and simple fact. And if we seriously need to recognize that, because we're going to continue to shoot ourselves in the foot. As time goes on, we're going to have the same, Groundhog Day arguments. It's in my, this isn't just an opinion. I mean, this is the harsh reality that of the time that we live in right now. We've been relying on tourism since the 70s when DuPont closed. There is no new money coming into this town without tourism, and we have to have new money. Without it, it's a stale economy that just circulates $1 bills around from different people's pockets, and nothing else happens. And the reality of business is that more money has to come in than goes out. Period. So we need to start developing amenities and come to the reality that this is what we have. We have nothing else.
Before you go, Tom, I just want to add to that. So the part of the memo that we're talking about here is talking about another potential way to increase revenue by potentially increasing the room tax from 6.5% to 8%. That's one way that we can increase revenues to the city, and the city could potentially keep a larger percentage of that additional increase. That's one way to go about it. In looking at the agreements that we have for the room tax commission, I believe the town of Bayview and the city have to have the same percentage. According to statute, we look today. Max, is that correct?
Yes.
So we would have to have conversations with Bayview to see if that's something that they would be interested in doing, if we're interested in doing that. And if they're not interested in raising their percentage, although I do want to point out that room tax that gets charged to the person staying in the lodging facility at 8% is not something, in my experience, that would make or break somebody's decision to stay in the lodging facility and or spend money in town afterwards. Not once have I made a decision going to the Madison area to not stay in Madison and stay in Verona instead because of the room tax being too high. It's just something that when you're traveling, you're planning on spending some money. And if someone is concerned about 1.5% room tax on their lodging, they're not going to spend money in town anyway. But that's just my opinion on that piece of it, and there's more conversation that will need to be had about whether or not we want to increase the room tax. That does not need to get decided right now. Tom?
I have one other question. I don't know if this could be budget related or not. How come we have never advertised the tourism industry in Washington? I saw one time where local business advertised during Apple Fest, and that was cool. I'm not gonna start screaming about it again because that's,
So,
that'll raise my blood pressure.
So-
Somewhere, somehow, that's what we need to do to enhance our tourism industry.
so
Besides-
one thing I'll say to that is, having worked in the tourism industry for a number of years, we do not advertise to ourselves. And so the advertising that is being done is generally being done outside of the area to bring people to the area. So you're not gonna see a lot of advertising to people locally in the Duluth market. Duluth is a day trip for us. It is not an overnight trip. That does not increase the room tax dollars. And so the focus is not on the local market. However, that is another piece of the puzzle. You know, we need to make sure that the Room Tax Commission is reporting back to the council on how those expenditures occur, so that we can be confident that those are being expended properly. So stay tuned for that, because that should be happening annually, and I don't think that it is. So we need to make sure that that does happen. Note for the Room Tax Commission agenda, we'll have an item on there, if we could, to discuss that. Anything else as far as the memo? Karen?
I guess I have one question about the potential increase in room tax. You're saying put it on the next meeting's agenda.
Not the increase in the room tax.
Okay.
Just the reporting is what I wanted to have on there.
So what would be the time frame for potentially getting a decision on room tax increase?
I'm trying to remember now the wording of the agreement, if it has to be like 6 months before the end of the year. So there's time
So not
to decide that. It's not
prior
going to
to
happen.
the next budget year?
I don't know that it would happen prior to the 2022
Okay,
budget.
that's my question. Yeah, okay.
I don't know that it would affect that directly.
Okay.
But it could change things if it happens, you know, at some point.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, Tony?
Sorry, Melissa's, she just sent a message that if she needs to comment about advertising or anything, she can do so, if you want her.
Okay, sure. Hang on one sec, Melissa. Dave?
Can we just get a clarification on, if we raise the room tax 1.5%, would the city be retaining all of that 1.5%?
No, the city can only retain up to 30% of the total. So I guess I don't know how you can engineer that,
We're less than that, though.
to be determined. We're
at
only at
90 and
10%.
10, yeah. And you're not, in the past, you have not been able to go backwards. So Bayview is 60-40, I think. No?
I think
70-30? Okay. So they went in wanting to retain more money from room tax. The city had already made a commitment to only keeping 10% many years ago. And so when Mary said the two communities have to be the same, they need to be the same at the 8%.
Correct.
But their amount being kept is already set out. Bayview can give the chamber more if they chose to, but I don't think they will, because they have their own projects going on. And we would remain at
The 90.
the 90 and 10, yeah.
For the 6.5%, but theoretically for the additional 1.5%, I think we could keep 30% of that, is my understanding.
That has to be looked
To
at.
be determined, yeah,
To be
to be,
determined.
details to be determined, for sure. That all has to get, we don't know enough right now to have that discussion.
Correct.
But,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott?
I wish to clarify some of the comments that are in the memo that have been discussed. And I think that everyone in the community needs to understand the situation of the city and how the city is funded. And yes, I understand that tourism is an important facet of the city's economy. And there are many benefits of that. But when we look specifically at how the city is funded, we have to keep in mind that we have limited options. when we're looking at room tax, the potential increase that we're discussing here is not going to be more than $5,000 a year for us. It's a very small amount. When we look at property tax, we don't, if whether a business, in most cases, whether a business is full or it's vacant, we get the same amount of property tax from that business. The only time we get an increase from a business is when there is new construction, and that is the key, is new construction. Doesn't matter what that is, but that's the only time that we benefit. The city does not benefit from sales tax. We get nothing the more people that we have here. We have actually a larger drain on our services. And that's going to be the next agenda topic that we're going to be discussing. And we have to keep that in mind. It's the property taxpayer that is paying for these services. And there needs to be a systematic structural change in this state to actually allow communities to incentivize being a tourist community. And that is the issue. And I want that to be very clear.
So I'm about to hand in a building permit application for an expansion. Olson's is putting an expansion on their piece of property. It's all tourism related. I don't care how you cut the mustard, it's tourism related. And if you want growth, particular commercial growth, we have to recognize that. And with that will come residential growth, provided we have the land available in our city to put them in. So, as far as drain on the city, I mean, I get that, but you know, a business isn't going to shut down their doors because too many people are in the building. I mean, you learn to figure out how to deal with it, and I get it's probably tough to find the pennies, you know, to shove from here and there. But what I would like is just a understanding that this is our industry. We should not be focusing on trying to attract some kind of whatever here without trying to develop our Main Street as a tourism economy. So that's my.
And we're not, there's nothing here that we need to decide tonight.
Right.
It's just looking for those ways to increase revenue to the city as we're looking at the budget. Anyone else have anything that they want to address in the budget memo or direction for the budget as we send it forward to finance and personnel?
Moving on.
Seeing none, we have a motion and a second to refer to personnel and finance with the items noted in our discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for that discussion. I'm sure we'll have more later when it gets down to the details. Our next item, tab 6, discussion and action on agreement with Washburn Professional Police Association Local 210. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to have Melissa talk about the advertising. If you would like to have Melissa from the chamber address that, I'm going to veer off of our agenda real quick and call you in, Melissa, if you're still there and available.
I am.
Thank you, sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's fine. So I appreciate the conversation that is happening around tourism, as well as room tax. I think the chamber is in a very unique position because not only are we a business membership organization, we also get the room tax, and so therefore a huge chunk of our time, energy, and funding is spent on tourism. Like Mary said, we are not in the business of advertising to locals. You are not going to see the things that we do because you're not my audience, you're not our audience. We are trying to get people from other communities, other states to come and visit. We have in the last 3 years increased the amount of advertising that we have done, not only within the state of Wisconsin, but also veering into Minnesota and the Duluth market. This year, the Department of Tourism put a lot of money into the Duluth market as well. So we've been able to piggyback off a lot of what the state is actually paying for to make our dollars go further. We have been advertising in things like Lake Superior Magazine quite often. Last week we were in their newsletter twice, encouraging them to discover Washburn on the byway and inviting them to come here to visit the byway and Washburn as well. This year we also did a visitor guide. We ordered 10,000 copies of that visitor guide. That has never been done before. In the past, we had a pamphlet that was like a single page, and we only ordered 1,500 of them. And in the past, we never fully distributed all 1,500. I can tell you that we are down to, I believe, 5 boxes of 500. That's all we have left of our tourism visitor guides out of the 10,000 that we ordered. So we are pushing tourism. We are pushing people coming here and inviting them to not only see, the beauty that we have, but hopefully entice them to then come here for good. So there's a lot that is going into this behind the scenes that you're not going to see. There's been an increase in people's interest in coming to Washburn, and I think you've seen that with the number of people that have been coming over the past couple years, and it's going to keep going up. We still have people calling us daily for visitor guides and more information about coming here. And that's not just from within Wisconsin, it's from other states, and we're pretty proud of that. So if you have anything specific you'd like to ask, I'd be willing to answer.
Thanks, Melissa. You good?
Yeah, I'm good to know.
All right, and we will get more information on that. All right, now moving on to discussion and action on agreement with Washburn Professional Police Association Local 210 on wages for 2022 and 2023. And this is tab 6 of your packet. Karen?
Just as background, and it's in Scott's memo, the Finance and Personnel Committee met, discussed, then met with the representatives of the union to begin looking at wages for 22 and 23. I think what struck us most significantly was where we landed in terms of comparison with salaries and wages from other communities, some of them the same size, some even smaller. We were at the bottom in terms of our wage structure. We have an excellent police force and want to retain that police force, understanding that salary isn't wages aren't the only thing that a person is looking at, but it is factors in as significant. The other reality is that there are less persons getting into law enforcement. So even the pool of new recruits or new police officers is limited. So with that as background, we felt that we needed to have a substantial, and even this is not really substantial, but at least gets us back into somewhat of a competitive stature, to increase the wages by 10.8% to $27.25 for the year of 2022, with a 2.5% increase in 2023, which would be $27.93. The union reps came back and were amenable to those figures, and I would recommend and hope that, in fact, I would move that the council approve the wages for 2022 and 23.
A second.
Motion by Karen, second by Carl. Just want to point out on this wage list here where we have a comparison of the surrounding communities. You know, our current amount there is by far the lowest out of anyone. And if you're looking at really local, you know, look at the city of Bayfield, and they're not even set for next year. They're already at basically what we're approving, hopefully, and the Ashland Police Department is the next closest. And then, of course, Bayfield County, which draws from all over, has a number of open positions at the higher wage that they offer. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So, staying with the theme of budget and money problems, our next item is discussion and action on Resolution 21-008 to authorize a tax levy referendum to fund emergency services staffing and operational needs during the spring 2022 election. This is not anything any of us want to do. I understand that. Nobody wants a referendum to increase taxes. However, we are in a position, which we have talked about, where we have no room to go, and we have cut as much as we can cut internally. And that's one of the things that I think will be helpful if we do approve this and move forward with a public outreach campaign about why we need a referendum, is to talk about those things that we have done to cut over the years that have gotten us at least to this point where we have survived for as many years as we have without having to do this. But right now, we are at the end of our rope as far as those sorts of measures without cutting into the very basic staff that we have and services that we're providing. And we have recently talked at length about some of the challenges with the emergency services, the ambulance service in particular, not being able to cover those shifts. And Carl is providing statistics to show the number of people that are unavailable for shifts is just increasing, because people are working other jobs during the hours that most of those calls are coming in. So, given all of that, and I appreciate, Scott, you spelling out what that means as far as, you know, someone with a property assessment of $100,000 would be paying an additional $159 a year in property taxes with this proposal. And so we are saying for a specific amount in the resolution here, but there's some room if anybody wants to change the exact wording of what we're saying here as far as funding emergency services staffing and operational needs, or adjusting that dollar amount at all. Karen?
I would like to consider increasing it to 200,000. It just seems, in my mind of math, that is an easier figure for people to get their heads around. I recognize that it means a higher increase in taxes. In the agenda, we talk about operational needs. The 174,400 would only be focused, significantly focused on the EMTs. And I guess the question is, the thought is, certainly we could use another $29,600. In my mind, 200,000 seems like a easier figure. I recognize it's more, but it just seems to me that that's just my thought on it.
And I don't know how much we need to spell out exactly what that would be used for. And I know one thing that we talked about potentially would be, and we haven't talked to anyone about this, but sidewalks. Sidewalks are a safety issue. Is that something that can be part of what this money would go for to replace, or is that a whole separate?
Could be anything we wanted to.
I suppose it could.
I want to say, whoa. This was started simply because we were talking fire, ambulance,
Well, I know,
and police. So if we're going to look to sell this, we need to sell it to what we have that we're in danger of losing.
And
so
I'm not saying that we wouldn't sell it on that. I'm just saying there are other things that we could also sell.
You know what? I would be opposed to that. I want it to be with the three things that we spoke about, because we have no idea who we may lose in the fire department. We know that we need new equipment to stay, current with the needs of the safety of our community. And we know right now we're kind of borrowing and going into our savings for the police. So anything extra to me remains with the three major services that this community, number one, I think takes for granted, and number two would be more apt to invest in than sidewalks or beautification or frickin' anything else. So,
but those would still be the major portion of the referendum.
To me, any dime received is a dime saved for the next possibility of need in the services. That's me, raising me that way. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. And we don't have a motion yet. I don't believe that was a motion, Karen, when you brought that up.
No, I was just sharing my thought on 17.
I don't mind going to the 200, I really don't, but it's the services for me.
Matt?
Yeah, not that I have a position what we should base it on one way or the other, but I've been involved with Ashland County's referendums attempts lately, both of which have failed, and they are in very bad financial situation, but they did these referendums saying we don't have enough money, we can't do anything, and without the specifics of exactly what those were going to be used for, I think it's hard for the residents to grasp really what they're voting for. Mm-hmm. So, we all know, yes, the city needs a lot more money everywhere. Residents don't see that, so really seeing, okay, we have a dollar for dollar plan of where this referendum is going to be spent, I think that gives it a lot higher likelihood of passing. Mm-hmm. So if our budget for the new EMT service or the fire service got up to 200,000, maybe that could be supportable, but I would caution just throwing in extra slush fund money if you want to not lose support.
Understood. Thank you. Appreciate that. Anyone else have, we should really get a motion on the table to have any further discussion. Tom?
I'll make a motion, but to remain at what we got, because it's going to be too hard to sell if we raise it up, then
It's going to be hard anyway.
it's been hard. It's been hard.
Right.
So a motion to proceed with $170,400 as the amount?
Yes.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Motion by Tom, second by Karen, to authorize a tax levy referendum to fund emergency services. You want to leave that wording the same? Staffing and operational needs during the spring 22 election. Any other discussion or comments?
Why would we have operational needs when it is specifically for public safety, the two EMTs, the two full-time EMTs and competitive police wages?
Because we don't know what will come down the pike, and operational needs could include equipment if we see that.
But the referendum would only be for the EMTs and the police wages, as it's currently written, am I right?
This would be, the referendum should be fine-tuned. This is just a resolution, right?
So this is the resolution that would authorize the referendum. If you want to know what the referendum language specifically is going to be, that is in your packet.
Your ballot language?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yes, it's from the sample ballot language from the Department of Revenue.
Right.
So it doesn't really say what it's for in the referendum. It just says
It,
what you have.
it doesn't have to say what it's for, but that's where my opinion would be to
Right.
be as detailed as possible in that referendum language. You can provide more details. You don't have to. These examples don't have that, but you can.
Okay.
Right.
So it could simply be fire, ambulance, police.
That's fine to say that, or it could say to hire 2 full-time
Right, be
EMTs.
too specific.
But we're not voting on that today
Yeah.
either, so.
So it could say, like it says in the paragraph below that's highlighted, for maintaining public safety services. And then that would cover everything that we're talking about. Karen?
My understanding is that the 170,400 is 145,400 for 2 full-time EMTs and $25,000 for police wages. Correct? Nothing for fire.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but always for me, if we were to go to the 200, I mean,
Uh-huh.
this is still even tight. These figures are very tight, even,
This is bare bones.
But
Yeah.
that's how we would publicize it, would it not be, that it's those 2 things that we're getting money for, correct?
specifically, I would say you're correct. Me, in my head, I've always got the 3 services is where my head's at. But I know the numbers, so.
So the question is, for the motion, Tom, do you want the wording to say as it states on the agenda, or something slightly more general or more specific? Maintaining public safety services, to fund additional ambulance and police needs, or as it states here, to fund emergency services, staffing, and operational needs.
I think it should be to fund for 2 full-time EMTs and police wages.
So very
I
specific.
think the more specific you are,
Right.
the bigger the chance of getting it passed.
Yeah, that's what I said.
And I agree. We need to sell it, we need to explain why
Right.
it's important at this point. But I agree with what you said.
So to fund 2 full-time EMTs and additional police wages.
Correct.
And is that okay for your second, Karen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? Dave?
So, I agree with Karen. I think having a $200,000, my fear is in today's marketplace for employment, EMTs are going to start getting sucked up all over the place. There's going to be less of them, and in order for someone to attract one, they're going to have to pay more. And are we paying the average right now, or are we considering what may be the average in a year from now, 2 years from now? So I'm a little concerned that if we stay at the 170, we're probably going to end up in the same boat right now, with having to find $20,000, $30,000 to and no one wants their taxes raised any more than they have to, but.
Yeah, we don't want to find ourselves here again and trying to bring the lead out of a stone or whatever,
So-
because we will.
It's a good question, and I know we talked a little bit, or you did in the memo, about it being an ongoing change. Does that mean it's that exact amount ongoing?
Yes. That's my understanding.
Correct.
Yeah.
Whatever dollar amount is approved is added to our base for levy limit calculations.
Every year, same amount.
And my further question is, and you may have said this in there, and please forgive me if I'm asking something that's already spelled out here, but does this also include the additional funds for paying more than $2 an hour to be on call and for the increase in anything else? Or is it just the 2 full-time EMTs and the additional police wages?
It is just the 2 full-time EMTs and additional police wages.
That's why.
I'm with you. I'm with you and Dave, yes.
Dave, go ahead.
As volunteers start to decline, we're going to have to entice people with something other than $2 an hour to get out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, let's be real.
Karen?
That was the point I was trying to make, that 170,400 is a great, I mean, you can do the math and it says, okay, I got it, 2 EMTs and police salaries. But it really locks us in at that point without any inflation or any changes in, what wages are, or the competition for EMTs. It just seems to me that some degree of wiggle room, and I understand what Max's comment is in terms of being specific. I think it's critical to be specific. We can't just say we need money. And that's why I think operational expenses isn't a good word, because they'll say, what are you doing? You're just having an ergonomic chair. We don't want to pay for that. So you need to break it down so you know exactly what you can say to constituents that say, well, why should I pay $200 more in property taxes, which is what it will be per 100,000 valuation. I think you need a little wiggle room.
Scott, did you have something?
So I just want to clarify that the proposed budget does increase the on-call rate to $3 an hour, and it does include increase the run rate by a couple dollars per run as well. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to solve the problem, but I just want you to be clear that there is in here a proposed increase in the budget. There's a proposed increase for next year. Whether that is enough, I cannot say. But so I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that.
I knew I had seen it somewhere. Any other comments, questions, or discussion on the motion, which is to authorize a tax levy referendum to fund emergency services, to fund 2 full-time EMTs and additional police wages?
I'm up for the 200. I'll just say that. so if you want to take the vote,
We're gonna have a hard time selling this, I don't know if we can sell 200,000.
but it's an extra $30,000.
29.6, yeah.
Yeah.
This is Laura.
Sure, go ahead.
To the couple of things I'm hearing is the first, when the $200,000 number was brought up, it was about it being a record number, and those things make sense, it simplifies it, but the point about details being important is absolutely correct, and I would feel a lot more convinced myself if I knew nothing else about why I was voting to pay more taxes. It would help me a lot to know exactly what it's going to. So if we were to increase it, I don't think going with the round number makes a difference. Having a specific number like it is means it's been thought out and it's for a very specific purpose. So it can be $200,000, but I think it should be chosen to the specific amount that would be needed to account for something expected or predicted. But what would that number be? I mean,
Well, right now it's 170,000.
But if we took,
right,
if we took
we're
what's
talking about
budgeted,
planning for possibilities and needing to increase things, or, you know, what kind of unexpected numbers, not unexpected, what do you expect is gonna come up that means that we're gonna have to run another referendum later if we can't do it, or we continue to struggle once we have these two employees? Scott, do you have a number? If you could go above this 170,400?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
I want to know what the number would be. If it's not 170,400, if you wanted to account for padding for something specific instead of just rounding up,
Okay.
what would you like to have for anything specific that would be a concern, unexpected costs that could occur? One, to have raises or bigger bonuses for EMT volunteers or EMS volunteers.
Incentive.
Can you give a more specific number than rounding up to 200,000?
I mean, without doing further calculation, I could not give you a specific number at this time. I would need to work on that more. What the stipend for officers should be, or it's very difficult to calculate I could calculate what the run rate is going to be if we had 3 EMTs responding to every call. Right now, we only have 50% of the EMTs even on call. And, half the time there's only one who, it's very difficult to calculate when the statistics keep changing. So it's hard. I'm not saying that, more could be or shouldn't be spent there. The bottom line I would tell you as far as going into the future, and will we need a referendum in the future, it goes back to my point earlier. It is mathematically impossible for the city to continue to operate the way that it has based on how we are structured with taxes. It simply does not compute. And so in the future, if laws do not change that allow us to change how things are funded, yes, a referendum will be required in the future, or you will have to make cuts. We are not keeping up. And that's just the bottom line. That's the fact.
so maybe to Laura's point, is the money that has been budgeted for those increases of runs and on-call and stipends for the officers, if we took what you budgeted now that we can look at and put that into the raising it up to the 200. We're still there taking care of the EMS, we're taking care of our volunteers, and we are hiring 2 new people. So the discussion with our public is the same. It's just that I know you'd have to have done squeezing in order to make up those increases for EMS. And I would say those increases in stipends for the officers gets shifted into the getting close to that 200 mark. And then you sit there with not a whole lot, granted, but we might have a little room to breathe. And if we don't have a referendum that passes, we at least know that it's been budgeted for. So that's the way I see it, you know, you're taking from A and putting to B, but it isn't some crazy secretive thing. We're still looking to increase the wages of our volunteers, hire 2 new people, and keep our police officers on staff. So it's the same discussion to
And
me.
it meets the public safety.
It does, it does, yes,
Which is what will sell it.
right.
If it sells.
Well,
Thank you, Mary.
When it sells.
That speaks my concern.
Right,
It's precautionary, it is about
right, yes,
making sure that we're accounting for those things either way.
yes.
So in the recommended budget, under the general fund, is that where the increases are budgeted for the officer and the on-call?
Correct, it's in the ambulance budget.
Okay, under the ambulance budget. I
But
mean,
you can't look at the bottom line because
Right,
there
right,
are
right.
other adjustments in there because
Right.
we've made other changes.
so we don't have a way to finagle that out of here at this very moment to
Correct.
come up with a number. Can we approve up to $200,000 with that exact number to be determined through budget or through finance and personnel?
We don't have to approve this resolution at this meeting.
Oh, there we go.
And I said that straight out. I mean, the point here was to get the discussion and get this close, and so we,
Okay.
you know, if you want to have the specific language, which you kind of discussed here, but if we have to come back and refine this next month, that's fine. It's not immediate that this has to be approved. We've got a couple months.
So,
Great.
with that having been said and reminded, thank you. So we have the motion currently by Tom, seconded by Karen, is for $170,000. And so I think for those 2 very specific things. So I'm gonna call a vote on that right now. And if we want that to be different, unless there's a different way to postpone that. So that way, if we're all after this discussion thinking maybe we need to tweak that a little bit different, that motion could fail, and then we could postpone another vote until another time, correct?
Yes.
So, having said that, and having gotten to this point in the discussion, I will call a vote on that motion that is on the table to approve $170,400 for 2 full-time EMTs and additional police wages. All in favor?
Aye.
No,
Who was that?
That was Tom and Carl
Okay.
at 174.
at $170,000.
Okay,
Opposed?
me.
Yes.
Nay.
4 opposed, motion fails. Good discussion, and let's revisit this. Can I have a motion to postpone, Karen?
I would move that we direct staff to come back at our next council meeting with information about additional needs that the ambulance service and police department have that we may want to include in our referendum.
There is a motion by Karen, second by Dave, to direct staff to come back with an updated figure and detail of what that would include to make sure that it's the amount we will need into the foreseeable future. Any comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everyone. Good discussion.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I need to excuse myself from the meeting for the last agenda item for a conflict.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you. Night, everybody.
Good night. And our next item is discussion and action on issuance of alcohol licenses for Santa Leyenda LLC at 901 West Bayfield Street, Class B fermented malt beverage and Class C wine, and 211 Martini LLC at 211 West Bayfield Street, Class B fermented malt beverage.
I move approval of the two licenses.
Motion by Karen, second by Dave. Any discussion? Tony?
I would like to add that, and I believe it's listed in the memo, Chief Johnson wanted to make sure that the approval for the Santa Leyenda was upon inspection. He has not been able to go to that property yet.
And I'm sorry, I meant to include that in my motion, that it's pending the final review of the property by the police chief.
And you're okay with that? Okay. Any other comments, questions, or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And our final item, discussion and action on authorizing notices for Scarecrow Pizza LLC at 905 West Mayfield Street for issuance of a Class B fermented malt beverage license and for issuance of a Class C wine alcohol license.
I would move that we move forward with the authorizing notices for Scarecrow Pizza for their licenses.
I'll second that.
Motion by Karen, second by Tom. Any questions, comments, or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second by Mary, second by Karen, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.